Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone podcast, episode number 706 for the 17th of April, 2022. Richard Saunders coming to you from Sydney, Australia. What time is it? My goodness me, it's just after 5 a.m. Why is it just after 5 a.m.? Well, that's the way the rotation of the Earth. And no, because I'm up early, because I live not far from the flight path or a flight path, and sometimes the aircraft go directly over the house. I'm also up early to beat the early birds, who are looking for the early worms, because at a certain time soon, the sun will come up soon, lots of birds start waking up and making lots of noise. So I'm beating all of that today to bring you the Skeptic Zone. The only thing I'm not beating are the early cats, the Skeptic Zone cats. They know I'm awake. They're outside the studio door thinking it's breakfast time. Soon, you two, soon. What's coming up on this week's show? We're going to start with an interview with an old friend of mine, Brian Dunning, from Skeptoid Media. Of course, the people who make the famous Skeptoid podcast. Brian has been working on a documentary for many years, and I have been interviewing him about this documentary over the last few years, hoping that it would come out, and at long last, it has. Science Friction is the name of the documentary. You can watch that on Prime Video, Prime Plus, I think it's called. Anyway, the Prime network, and also on the Tubi, T-U-B-I. But more details about that coming up in the show, or you can just check out the show links at skepticzone.tv. Anyway, kicking off today's show is my old friend from Bend, Oregon, Brian Dunning. I notice it's been snowing lately in Bend, Oregon. Ooh, I would like to be there to see that. Following that, I catch up with Maynard at Maynard's International Studios Annex here in Sydney. Maynard was in Sydney. I dropped by to say hello, and it just turned into some sort of bizarre Maynard recording session where we talk about everything and nothing. A peep into Maynard's world coming up a bit later on in the show. Then we have another installment of the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham, and this week it's a part one. It's part one of a two-parter about the body dysphoria, phantom limbs, all that sort of thing. An interesting sort of report by Professor Marcello Costa. And, of course, this is from the pages of the Skeptic magazine. Then to round off the show, another trip into Trove, the Trove archives. Well, this time we're heading across the pond, the ocean, to search for references to Canada. I hope you're listening, Adrian Hill. Now, a slight correction from last week's episode. I think we mentioned the fact that Rob Palmer, my friend Rob Palmer, and I appeared on an atheist podcast to talk about the Great Australian Prediction Project, and I think we got the name wrong. And I think we got the name of the podcast wrong. It's The Thinking Atheist. At thethinkingatheist.com is where I and Rob Palmer appeared some weeks ago. If you go to that website and check that out, have a look, you can hear an interview about the Great Australian Psychic Prediction Project. And that episode appeared on the 9th of March. Now, I noticed that despite appearances, despite life seeming to get back to normal with people in the shops and in clubs and pubs and venues and whatever, a lot of people are still wearing masks, which is a very good thing because, according to the statistics, a lot of people are still getting COVID. Thousands of people every day in this state, New South Wales, and in Victoria, people are still getting COVID every day. The pandemic is not over. And if you, listening to this right now, have COVID, all of us at the Skeptic Zone hope that it's brief, the symptoms are mild, and you can get over it relatively soon. It's hard to give advice. Stay in bed. Drink lots of fluids. Painkillers. It's somewhat of a comfort to know that I would imagine that most of the listeners to the Skeptic Zone at least would of course be up to date on their vaccinations, which can only help. Nevertheless, if you're If you're under the weather with COVID, I'm thinking of you. But now it's time for me to run downstairs because there are two cats outside the door insisting on breakfast. What will it be this morning? I think they're going to get some cat food. While I attend to all that, I hope you enjoy the Skeptic Zone. Joining me now all the way from beautiful Bend in Oregon. I can vouch for that, folks. It's a beautiful place. It's the host and producer of Skeptoid, the Skeptoid podcast, Brian Dunning. Hello, Brian.
Hey, Richard. Thanks for having me.
Hey, anytime. I know we haven't seen each other for quite a while because of the pandemic, and that's no surprise. But when I did see you some years ago, I remember we once went in a lava tube, and we were examining and exploring that and just having a good time. And we were discussing that
yes.
If you ever get to Oregon, go into a lava tube, just do it. Yes, we were discussing the documentary you were working on called Science Friction. Now, it's no secret you've been working on this documentary for a long time. And there's been a few roadblocks along the way, but I think at last you have some good news for our listeners.
Yes, it's finally out. It's finally available where people can go and go online and see it. Well, not online, or I guess you can see it online.
Yes.
It's available on Tubi TV, and it's available on Amazon Prime Video.
Yes.
It is supposed to be a worldwide release, but certain countries take longer for it to work its way through the system than others. So I don't promise that it's available on both of those systems for everyone, but it should be at some point pretty soon. So Tubi TV and Prime Video is where you can see Science Friction.
Now, folks, if you're in the United States, just go to skepticzone.tv and click the link, and you'll be directed to the Prime Video. The video is on Prime. If you go to skepticzone.tv and you're in Australia, have a look in the show notes and you'll find the link to Tubi, Tubi, where you can watch the documentary here in Australia. Now, I watched the documentary last night.
Yay.
I had the beverage of my choice, put my feet up, which is always a good idea. I sat back and enjoyed an hour and a half of the finished Science Friction. Now, for our listeners who may not know much about this whole adventure, can you give us an overview of what Science Friction is about and what inspired you to make it?
So it's a documentary about scientists who go on TV as talking head experts and get deceptively edited out of context or misquoted, or they edit them in such a way to make it seem like the scientist is saying whatever the show's narrative is that they want to promote rather than what the science actually says. For example, one of the experts that we have is a shark scientist, and they were asking me about some mythical monster shark, which of course is not real, and he'd never even heard of it.
Wow.
And so then they asked him, would big sharks be in this water right here? And he said, oh yeah, big sharks, they can come right up in here. And then they grafted that answer onto the first question. So it sounds like they're asking him, is there the giant monster shark right here? And he says, oh yeah. And now that's the kind of thing that we've got an hour and a half of in the movie. It's just absolutely astonishing what these TV shows will go through to promote their History Channel, Discovery Channel, Nat Geo / ... whatever. These ridiculous stories that they're always trying to promote. We've got a big segment on ancient aliens. We've got a big segment on the Dr. Oz show, with a number of people who went on his show and just got treated horribly.
I did enjoy watching the segment with Dr. Oz, or about Dr. Oz, because our good friend and colleague, Dr. Steve Novella, is featured.
Of the Skeptic's Guide for the Universe. Yes, he's on there. One of the reasons that we wanted to make this movie is that people who listen to your podcast, my podcast, the whole skeptic scene, whatever, we're generally familiar with the fact that this happens, and we generally know that these TV shows are promoting bad information. But a lot of people in the general public aren't aware of that. and they've never been given any reason to suggest that. So what we're trying to do with this is show them in a fairly dramatic way, look, this TV show is not only making stuff up to fool you, to deceive you, they're doing it in a really underhanded and deceptive way in some cases. So it's a great way to bring an important issue to the public's attention. And, I would love to think that one day there'll be some pushback against these kind of practices, but that might be pie in the sky for now.
Oh, we like to think a lot of things, Brian. We like to think a lot of things might happen because of skeptical activism. But, well, but this whole project, I mean, this really was or is your baby, isn't it?
Yeah, I've been wanting to make this film for a long, long time. And it really was 2016 was actually when we started working on it. And this was just after we finished production on my previous film, Principles of Curiosity, which was directed by my friend Ryan C. Johnson. And so once we got done with the part that I had to be really busy on, the production part of that, then I started Science Friction, and I got Emery Emery, a name known to some of your listeners maybe. He's a director and a comedian as well. He directs a lot of the things on Penn and Teller's Fool Us shows, those little the biographies of the magicians at the beginning of the show. He was the editor on the Aristocrats, not Aristocats, and he's kind of an old pro at this sort of interview style, kind of raw edited. It was just the kind of vibe that I wanted on this film, and he and I have been friends for a long time, and so just kind of a natural choice. So we set about. I opened up fundraising. This is a Skeptoid Media project. Skeptoid Media is, of course, the nonprofit that I work for, making the Skeptoid podcast and the other people in the company. And so, as an educational nonprofit, we can fundraise and get the project funded by grants and donations. And we were under budget. And so what that meant is we couldn't do what I would normally do and what we did with Principles of Curiosity, which is to hire a full film crew, go out and make the movie beginning to end, and it's done. So with this being so far under budget, we had our crew, but we had to have a very small crew, and they had to take time to work on better paying jobs because we couldn't pay them a full market rate, which is extremely frustrating for me as a producer to not be able to pay people everything that they're worth. But they were sports about it. We got the film done. It just took a lot longer in production. And then COVID hit, and then we had various other roadblocks. I don't know if we want to talk about those or not, but
let's mention those briefly because we did cover this last time you were on the show.
Okay.
And you were talking about some of the delays in the project. Basically, one of the things that came up, you were saying, was as you were making it or towards the end of making it, it occurred to you that certain film networks, TV networks, so on, would not be happy at all at what was being exposed.
Yeah, and it wasn't so much my concern that networks wouldn't be happy about it. I don't mind. I don't care if they're happy with the film or not, but they're part of a whole ecosystem that runs an industry, and part of that is distributors and insurers, and kind of everyone has to be on board with a project, including an industry law firm, including an industry insurance company, and you've got to have all of that together before you can go into distribution. And since our film Science Friction has uncomplimentary things to point out that have happened at virtually every network and movie studio in town, first we couldn't find a law firm that had no conflicts of interest. And then we couldn't get insurance from an industry law firm. And very long story short, it took that whole part of the process tacked probably 2.5 years onto the end of the post-production. So at long last, a lot of money, a lot of spirit, a lot of energy, a lot of late nights, and me feeling horrible about not being able to get this movie out that so many people had invested so much in. I'm very gratified to finally have it out and finally have it available for everyone to watch and enjoy.
Well, it's frightening in a way because as consumers, when you're watching a science documentary and you see a scientist and they come out and they put forward their point of view or they state their case based on what you assume they really believe based upon all the research. And then, well, as you point out, you can't always trust what you see.
Yeah, I mean, we do mention that this doesn't necessarily happen most of the time. I mean, it's relatively rare, but that's actually part of the problem. When something is consistently bad, people can simply distrust it and dismiss it. But when it's got BS sprinkled in along with good information, then people have no way to know which is which. And so it can arguably be even more dangerous to have misinformation that's inconsistently applied.
Science fiction has only been released to the world for less than a week. Is that right?
Yeah, just over the weekend, I think, is when I first saw it popping up on Amazon Prime.
Have you had any feedback yet?
Yes, I've seen a tremendous amount of positive feedback.
Good.
A lot of people saying things like, hey, every student should be required to watch this. And that's exactly what we're going for. That's what I care about.
Yeah, I think that's wonderful. I mean, I saw the rough cuts over the years as you were putting it together and some early edits that weren't quite complete and things like that. And I was very pleased the other day just to sit back and enjoy the full documentary with more bits that I hadn't seen, and it was a lot tighter, of course, being the final edit. So the clue is, folks, the message, run to skepticzone.tv, click those links. If you're in North America, you can watch it on Amazon Prime, I guess, and if you're in Australia, you can certainly watch it on the Tubi app or the Tubi system, but I imagine soon it'll be available all around the world. Brian, I'll have to come back to Oregon soon, hopefully this year. And you know what? I think last time I was visiting your place, I think I dropped $20 down behind the sofa. Did you ever find that?
I've never seen that $20. It didn't make it to any of the local brew pubs.
I'll have to come back and check for myself. But for now, Brian Dunning from Skeptoid Media and the Skeptoid podcast, of course, a wonderful podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Mick West. In my podcast, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, I have extended conversations with people who have been involved in conspiracy culture. I do this for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it's really interesting. These people have great stories about how they fell down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, what they did down there, and what it was that helped them out. Sometimes I also talk to people who investigate conspiracy theories, and they have equally fascinating stories from the other side. Secondly, I want to understand how best to prevent the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation, which is an increasing problem in a time when alternative media is exploding. The best way to do this is to communicate effectively with the people involved, and the best way to do that is with a nice long chat. So check it out, Tales from the Rabbit Hole, tftrh.com.
Here's Maynard's spooky action at a distance.
Hello, valued listener. It's Maynard here, just butting into this episode here with Mr. Bloody What's-His-Name, because he's here.
I'm Mr. Watson. Maynard, here I am. I'm back at the Maynard International Studios Annex here in Sydney.
That's correct, and we do have a leaf blower going outside, but that's by my request.
Are you the guy who requests that aeroplanes and leaf blowers come to my studios every time I try to record?
Cost me a fortune, but believe you me, valued listener, it's worth it. Look, I'm just here to remind you that Richard is a bit too polite the way he likes to mention that you should support the Skeptic Zone. It's been going now for over 300 years, a long time before the invention of podcasting. And look, get on to his Patreon and just give a little bit as a one-off if you want to, or just become a regular subscriber for a small amount each month and help the whole thing go. Because without you, there'll be nothing. It'll sound like this. it'll be just a leaf blower.
It'll be just a leaf blower.
With no science whatsoever. And it's good you're covering body dysphoria
This week, yeah.
body dysphoria, because I have body dysphoria fairly in a major way. When I look at myself in the mirror, I think I look just fine.
Oh.
And from what I gather, what my image of what I'm seeing does not match with reality.
One of those magic mirrors, though.
Yeah, oh yeah. It makes me look just great there. So that's my own personal dysphoria. I wish to not speak about anyone else's.
But you make a good point, of course. And as I say at the end of every episode, it's only because of the listeners who support the show that there is a show. That's it. That's it. I mean, I love doing the show. You contribute. You love doing your parts and my reporters. But without the financial help of listeners, no show. No show.
Look, or as I like more bluntly to put it, you can't expect something to be there next week if you don't support it this week.
Good point. Well made, Maynard.
Yeah.
And we're looking, listen, dear listener, we are looking at the next generation of audio equipment that you and I might be purchasing before long.
Yes. Well, currently I'm using one that has a microphone, and it's great. Records to a microphone. Not so much good for if you want to do line out from mixing desks and things like that. So I'm hoping to get something like that in the near future. But, I'm going to have to save up my pennies. And Richard wants you to save up your pennies. Right. We doesn't want you to buy it for him. Just contribute a bit. Chip in, as they say. Chip in. When he's brought over a book here that I've got to study. Should I mention it or keep it secret?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Maynard, in a couple of weeks, you're going to be interviewing an author down in Melbourne by the name of George Ivanoff.
If that's his real name.
If that's his real name. He's written a book called The Supernatural Survival Guide, and it seems to be directed more at younger people, but it's all about UFOs and Bigfoots and monsters and all sorts of things.
It reminds me of one of those books that Time Life used to put out in the 70s about, curses, or they'd put it out about mysteries
Looks like a fun book.
or cryptids. Yeah. And it covers all that, and it's sort of almost sort of an A4 format. It's quite nice.
And it's bright green.
Yes, bright green, because so we know goo is green and scary stuff is green, and something's dramatic, as anyone who's ever watched The X-Files would know, because there's blue lighting. Any Duran Duran film clip with blue lighting in it means there's drama involved, and anything involving Skolder and Mully. Skolder and Mully right. With blue lighting means, there's problems. And also, whenever you watch The X-Files, they had torches, particularly in the first season.
They do.
Very heavy torches, because that was pre-LED, I think, and the batteries were very heavy. So I remember, hearing that they were quite heavy, those torches.
The back of the book says, have you ever had a close encounter with a UFO? Is your house haunted? Have you seen a Yeti? Don't worry, the Supernatural Survival Guide has all the info you need to survive a brush with the spooky. So that's very interesting. And speaking about Mulder and Scully and Mulder and all those sort of people, and I mentioned this on my Facebook page the other day, there's a series of advertisements here in Australia for an insurance company, and the main character is a paranormal investigator who does origami.
Look,
I kid you not.
Look, obviously they've based the entire series of commercials on your life, Richard.
I think so. It was just pretty sad, but there you go.
And they haven't really gone for much of a David Duchovny look with the guy either.
And he doesn't look a thing like me, anyway.
No, it doesn't look anything like me. He's got that little bit of a gumshoe look, but he's that face where I've seen that guy in something. And those are the people, particularly in a small industry like Australia. I've seen that guy in something. Yeah. Those are the people that get ads, because at the interview they'll be going, we've seen that guy in something. Let's put him in an ad, because we can't actually name him to something, but we recognise his face.
I think they've based the character on the classic sort of detective look. You remember the Night Stalker series?
Oh, yeah.
That with a hat and in the trench coat sort of look, and the out in the dark looking at things. So that's very interesting.
Of course, you'll be looking at the fantastic work of Darren McGavin there, not to be confused with the guy who plays the captain of the Love Boat.
That's right, and that series was, mid-70s, I think.
That's right, yes. You had Kolchak, the Night Stalker.
That's it, yes.
There are only 20 episodes made, 74 and 75. But Darren McGavin was in a whole heap of stuff. We were just looking here, and he was in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and The Night Stalker, and he did actually guest on two episodes of The Love Boat in 1980. So, and he was in Magnum P.I. Could he have been in any more cool shows? Wow. Well, he was in The Return of Marcus Welby, which I didn't even know existed. And
Murphy Brown.
Yep, Murphy Brown. Yep. Wow, there you go. So that's Darren McGavin. So be like Darren McGavin and donate to the Skeptic Zone.
Be like him and donate. Well, it's the sort of look, the classic look they've gone through in this advert, as if all us paranormal investigators wear these hats and, go out and maybe we do. I don't know.
No, but there is the ex-police detective who is the paranormal investigator that we met at the Brisbane Skepticon. Intense conversation.
Joe Nichol.
Very, very intense conversation with Joe Nichol about the partial palm print of Neil Harvey on the rifle.
Archives. If you go to skepticzone.tv, click the episode link, the next page you come to will give you a search box. And you can search for Joe Nichol and hear that very interview.
It's a great interview. He really took me to school that day. Let me tell you, he gave me a big glass of Shut Up juice and described the perfect mint julep and where and how the best place to drink it is.
He did.
He did indeed.
It rings a bell, but after 700 plus episodes, it's hard to remember isolated bits, you know.
Well, look, and speaking of isolated, we are looking forward to getting out and doing more interviews in the field.
Yeah.
We're just waiting for it to be just a bit. I'm what do they say? I'm COVID hesitant. As they call me in the medical world, they're COVID hesitant to get out there among people, and I'm doing a little bit of things here and there. I've got a gig coming up at the 30th of April at the Botany View Hotel, doing an 80s gig there at the Electric Dreams. Botany View Hotel, 30th of April. That's going to be probably the only gig I've done this year, and who knows when the next one's going to be, because I'm not playing well with other people. Like I said, COVID hesitant.
COVID hesitant. Now, people want to find out more, they can go to maynard.com.au.
Yes, we've been doing other stuff you've been helping me out with, but I will be back soon on the Skeptic Zone doing something when you least expect it, like now. Got to go. I've got to kick the guy who's doing the leaf blowing.
The leaf blower's moved from one side of your studio to the other. He's out.
That's right.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. Or is that a vacuum cleaner?
Look, and I've got to pull a bit of a Dick Van Dyke, run up to him, kick him in the shins and run away. Oh, old bamboo, the old bamboo. Hit him with the old bamboo. Hello, this is Maynard. Did you know that you can listen to the Skeptic Zone on YouTube? Yes, I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. Also, you can hear 40 logical fallacies with Michelle Bickersma and funny sketches with Richard Saunders and a host of other skeptics. Just click on the YouTube links on the homepage at skepticzone.tv.
And now, a reading from the Book of Tim with Tim Mendham.
Hi, my name's Tim Mendham. I'm the Executive Officer of Australian Skeptics Inc. and editor of our quarterly journal, The Skeptic. You can read The Skeptic on our website, skeptics.com.au. Today I'll be talking in the first of a two-part article called Out of Body, Out of Mind, which is written by Marcello Costa, and looking at how the mind creates many of our mysteries, especially regarding parts of our body. And this appeared in the March 2010 issue of the magazine, which is volume 30, number 1. And as I said, you can download that issue for free from our website, skeptics.com.au. And Marcello says, how wonderful it is to be able to move my fingers whenever I want, to feel that the fingers are mine, and that while I am writing this article, all of my body appears to follow my will. I look at the world from inside me. I'm aware of where I am in space. I easily recognise peoples and places. I can speak to myself without uttering words, but I can distinguish clearly this inner speech from that of other people speaking. This is a remarkable and powerful, deep feeling of being a single self, able to reflect on who I am. There are moments when we may have uncanny illusions of being somewhere else, or having already seen something that we experience for the first time, or making a gesture we did not really intend. Extraordinary experiences of this kind are more common than realised, They can occur in normal people or are revealed dramatically in some abnormal conditions. These illusions are a window on the way in which the brain works, and neuroscience is beginning to explain their neural basis. When a blindfolded participant taps the nose of another person while somebody else taps the blindfolded person's nose in synchrony, the blinded subject feels its nose growing. This is known as the Pinocchio Illusion, from the famous children's story by the Italian author Collodi of the wooden living puppet Pinocchio, with his nose growing as he tells lies. This simple test reveals that perception of our own body can be altered with no obvious physical change. Conversely, a limb may have been amputated, but the subject still feels it has been there. This phantom limb illusion is due to the normal voluntary motor signals from the brain looping back to within the brain itself, replacing the signals that normally would have come from the intact limb. Our own body image can be felt to detach from the physical body and take on a phantom existence. The subjective image of our body emerges from the convergence of multiple senses, the visual system, the balance system, and the sense of body position and movements, in a particular part of the brain near the angular gyrus. This strongly suggests that the brain continuously checks and compares the sensory signals from the body with the motor signals, building a strong sense of embodiment, i.e. of a self localized within one's bodily borders as if the body fits like a glove. On the other hand, the concept of disembodiment is used to describe situations in which people feel they have an abnormal body. This may lead to abnormal behaviour, including an overwhelming desire to amputate one or more healthy limbs or other parts of the body. It's called body integrity identity disorder, also known as amputee identity disorder. Disturbances of body image may well be responsible for numerous and diverse problems of many adolescents and adults. The most extreme experience of disembodiment is the out-of-body experience. Some individuals report feelings of being outside their own body, hovering above it and seeing themselves from above. These experiences are often associated with near-death experiences or a variety of neurological disorders. Such bizarre out-of-body experiences can be elicited by electrical stimulation of an area in the lateral parts of the cortex, the angular gyrus, in patients evaluated for epilepsy surgery. This strongly suggests this kind of anomalous experience may be due to malfunctioning of the normal embodiment process. Some patients, usually left-side hemiplegics who have suffered from a stroke, will experience a disassociation from their paralysed limbs. For example, some may be convinced that their paralysed leg is not really theirs but belongs to a stranger. They will maintain that their real leg has disappeared and will even attempt to kick their own leg out of bed. The abnormal feeling is often due to lesions on the right side of the parietal cortex. Recently, neuroscientists used a simple method for inducing feelings of out-of-body experience in healthy volunteers. Two teams of cognitive neuroscientists used head-mounted video displays to give people a different perspective on their own bodies. Each team also drew upon the sense of touch to enhance the illusion. People in both experiments reported feelings of dissociation from their bodies. One researcher, referring to his own experience after the experiments, said that he really felt that he was sitting in a different place in the room and was looking at this thing in front of him that looks like himself and he knew was himself, but it didn't feel like himself. These experiments highlight the potential of modifying deep personal experiences by virtual realities, which of course has now been taken up in games and all sorts of areas like that since this article was written. It's a very real experience for a lot of people. Even the mysterious and odd feeling of a mysterious presence felt by some individuals next to or behind them, often attributed to some paranormal phenomenon, is likely to be due to abnormal activation of the brain process normally involved in giving us the feeling of being within the boundaries of our body. One researcher's team found that electrical stimulation of a patient's angular gyrus elicited the weird sensation that another person was lying beneath her on the bed. The figure felt like a shadow that did not speak or move. These spooky feelings of foreign presence nearby is probably an exaggeration of normal functions of great survival value as being aware of dangers. What was a field of purely mystical experiences is becoming the subject of fascinating scientific exploration of human experiences. The Cotard syndrome represents the ultimate extreme feeling of disembodiment, that of being dead, when probably all the senses become disconnected from the emotional centres. A more localised disconnection between the fusiform face area, a region of the cortex involved in face perception, and the amygdala, diamond-shaped, which is involved in the emotional responses to familiar faces, results in a syndrome called Capgras. Patients feel that even family members may be alien imposters, as they do not recognise them emotionally. This sense of bodily experience can be extended to habitual tool or prosthesis use that effectively extends the body's area of influence. It is likely that this illusion of extended body space has been instrumental for tool making in human cultures. This has profound implications for designing complex machinery to extend manual skills, taking into account the remarkable ability of the brain to build a personal space with an extended self. Now, that's the end of part 1 of this article of Out of Body, Out of Mind by Marcello Costa, which appeared in the March 2010 issue of The Skeptic, Volume 30, Number 1. And next week in the Skeptic Zone, I'll continue with this story in part 2.
Drinking, hey, oh, drinks, hey.
So nice to be back at Skeptics in the Pub.
Yes, Richard, it's great that COVID-19 is a thing of the past and we can gather together and not wear masks. Although I will occasionally, in special situations, you know what I mean, don't you?
This beer tastes better than I remember. And this beer glass is much bigger than I remember. Oh, thanks for this. I'll get the next round.
No need. All the beer is free tonight.
Free? Oh, wow.
Did you hear that all the anti-vaxxers and flat earthers have changed their minds?
What? Really?
Yeah. They're now busy writing apology letters to the whole world. They're really busy. They're going to have to sharpen their pencil, if you know what I mean.
Look. It's Lara coming over here with a plate full of food.
Hi, you two. Did you know that the food at the bar is free tonight? Anything you want.
Really?
You have to try the lobster and chips.
Lobster and chips? Oh, wow. This is like a dream.
And this pub now has recliner chairs, a free foot massage for everyone, and vouchers for Uber rides home.
Wow.
Hang on. This seems too good to be true. Who's the guest speaker? It's not bloody Brian Dunning, is it?
Let me see. This is odd. It says here it's the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
The skeptical godmother fairy in... You know, that sounds familiar.
Smoking it up, woman.
Hello, everyone.
Who are you? What, you're only 10 centimetres tall. That's about 4 inches for those of you using the Darth Vader Imperial system. And floating in the air, that can't be right.
As Lara said, I'm the skeptical fairy godmother angel from the internet.
Ask a silly question.
And you're tonight's guest speaker?
Well, not really. I have come to tell you that, yes, this is all a dream.
I thought this was too good to be true.
I know we can't meet in pubs at the moment, but that shouldn't stop you from enjoying skeptical talks online. The Vic Skeptics have Skeptics Cafe each month. Sydney has Skeptics in the Pub. There are online events from the Gold Coast and...
Yes. This all sounds eerily familiar. Have we met before somewhere?
Maybe we have. Maybe it was as we watched a live and interactive skeptical talk. All you need do is search for them online, no matter where you are in the world.
She's right. I've been watching skeptical talks from the UK, the US, and even one from my own living room. Although that one wasn't very interesting. I fell asleep and I was the speaker.
Hang on. Weren't you once the Tooth Fairy?
I'll never live that down.
One last question.
Yes?
Just whose dream is this?
Mine. Goodbye.
It's worse than sparklers.
She disappeared.
But, we're still here, huh?
Right. So, lobster and chips, anyone?
Oh, yeah, he only pays for food and drinks in the dream, let me tell you, people.
It's time once again to turn our attention to the digital archives from around the world. From around the world. Normally it's Australian digital newspaper archives we look through. Sometimes they're from the United States. Today we head north, not quite north to Alaska, but north to Canada, land of maple syrup waffles, and our reporter Adrian Hill. And as some of you know, I spent a few years of my very early life living in Canada, in the little tiny village of Tribune in Saskatchewan. Hello to all the people listening in Saskatchewan, Tribune, or indeed in Canada. So my search criteria this week was Canada and paranormal, supernatural, things like that, to see what I could find. And the first return, or one of the first returns coming back, is from the Brandon Sun, dated Saturday, September the 28th, 1996. People Really Do Want Incredible to Be True, by Scott Magnish, Toronto Sun, the Canadian Press. Toronto. The truth may be out there, but paranormal detective Joe Nickell says it's not always what people prefer to hear. Like Fox Mulder in the hit TV show The X-Files, Nickell has spent decades investigating reports of the supernatural, haunted houses, alien abductions, and weeping icons, to name a few. He has yet to find evidence of any of them, and, unlike his fictional counterpart, he isn't optimistic. I guess you could call me a frustrated would-be believer, admits the senior research fellow of the Committee for the Scientific Investigations of Claims of the Paranormal, an international non-profit agency founded in 1976 by scientist Carl Sagan. I've found hoaxes and I've found mistakenly diagnosed natural events, but I've never found anything close to evidence of the paranormal. His recent experience investigating a weeping icon in Toronto is a case in point. Thousands lined up in front of the tiny Greek Orthodox church to see the Virgin Mary cry tears that Nickell says looked more like splatters from a nearby oil lamp than a sign from God. I guess that's why they haven't made a TV series called The Nickell Files yet, he says. Finding scientific explanations for seemingly paranormal events isn't anywhere near as sexy as finding aliens and angels. Or anywhere near as profitable, he says, noting thousands of dollars that Mother Potetissa and Saints Raphael, Nicholas and Irene Church was reportedly collecting each day. The paranormal attracts hoaxes the way honey attracts bears, and I've seen more than a few hoaxes in my day. Like England's crop circles, which Nickell says started appearing in North America after TV's Unsolved Mysteries aired a segment on them, or the Roswell alien autopsy video, which sold millions before it was debunked by Nickell and his counterparts at Psychop as little more than a special effects extravaganza. Some claims of the paranormal are just misinterpretations of natural phenomena. Hearing a heartbeat in a statue can be nothing more than the echo of your own, and the photo that appears to have a ghost in it is usually the result of a flawed printing process. Despite evidence to the contrary, people want to believe in the supernatural. Ratings for paranormal TV are at an all-time high. The X-Files and The Outer Limits are being joined this fall by new series like Dark Skies and Strange Universe. A Gallup poll released in 1992 suggested Canadians were becoming less skeptical. 18% of respondents said they believed in witches, compared with 11% in 1989. Other findings. A University of Chicago survey found that 40% of American adults polled believed they have had contact with the dead, nearly twice as many as 20 years ago. 2 out of 3 report having experienced extrasensory perception, and 3 out of 4 believe in life after death. California State University in Los Angeles said 27% of high school and college students believe vampires exist, and a 1995 Time magazine poll found 69% of Americans believe in miracles. American cultural historian T.J. Jackson Lear's book, No Place of Grace, says the upsurge of popular occultism represents a spiritual longing in the masses. Quote, theoretical formulae have faded, but the impulse behind them persists, end quote. Lears writes. Suzanne Scorson, spokeswoman for the Toronto Archdiocese of the Roman Catholic Church, says the weeping icon controversy is precisely why the Vatican investigates claims of the paranormal. We certainly hold the belief that miracles are possible, Scorson says. But we can't assume that everything claiming to be miraculous is a miracle. There's a natural phenomenon and outright fraud that has to be taken into account too. And we have a photograph accompanying this story of Joe Nickell leering over the shoulder of a priest, it would seem, is looking at a painting of the Virgin Mary shedding tears. Nickell, an internationally known expert, says he's never found evidence of the paranormal. And our next excerpt comes from the Brandon Sun, September the 18th, 1990. Under the heading of No Evidence, skeptics debunk all claims. Brussels, Reuters. In the Soviet city of Voronezh last year, residents reported seeing 3 aliens emerge from a shining ball. Such stories and other reports of paranormal activity from around the world sometimes make news. They also become targets for a group of scientists and others from Europe to North America, skeptics dedicated to debunking claims of paranormal activity. And I will stop there quickly just to remind everybody, of course, journalists have a tendency to write things like this, and as you well know, we don't set out to debunk things, we set out to investigate. With the rare exceptions if we know something's a fraud to begin with in certain situations. But anyway, the skeptics who recently held a conference in Brussels say there is not a shred of scientific evidence that the stars affect our destinies, that beings from outer space have ever set foot on Earth, or that anyone can foresee the future. We find a great ignorance of what science is, says Paul Kurtz, a philosophy professor at the State University of New York, who is chairman of the Committee for the Scientific Investigations of Claims of the Paranormal. There's a confusion between science fiction and reality. The committee, whose members include prominent astronomer Carl Sagan, sponsored the so-called European Skeptics Conference. One participant was James the Amazing Randi, an American magician and author who for 24 years has offered $10,000 to anyone who can prove supernatural ability of any kind. Randi says more than 600 people have tried to win the award, and all have failed. He says his newest book, which will show the 16th century French astrologer Nostradamus may have been a provocative social critic, but was an entirely unsuccessful prophet. Randi demonstrated his own powers by making the hands of a watch move forward mysteriously by half an hour. But it's only a trick, he said. Though it looks like psychic ability. Why the fascination with the supernatural in an age of scientific advance? People are looking for magic, romance, easy solutions, Randi says. The new openness in the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe has brought increased reports of paranormal activity there, several conference participants said. When Kurtz visited the Soviet Union last year, he discovered that a popular television celebrity was a, quote, psychic healer, end quote. The man's followers believed that he imparted healing powers to tubes of cold cream and jugs of water placed in front of television sets showing his program. With less control over media as state domination is relaxed, these ideas often fly and there is insufficient critical dissent, Kurtz said. In fact, the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal believes the media, eager to profit from the interest in the supernatural, are responsible for much of the public's confusion. The group urges newspapers to run disclaimers with their astrology columns. Wim Betts, a professor of medicine at the Free University of Brussels, is more worried about medical quackery. In 20 years of practice, I've heard dramatic stories of people dying of cancer, selling their houses and giving their money to quacks, he said. The relatives are so ashamed, they don't want to talk about it. And apologies for my appalling Belgium accent. What would Hercule Poirot say? And finally, we turn to the pages of the Lethbridge Sun-Times, dated the 20th of February 2008, in a column called Strange But True, by Bill Soanes and Rich Soanes, PhD, for the Sun-Times, which looks like write in a question and they will endeavour to answer it column, with the heading, Did Stupidity Kill the Dodo Bird? Which they attempt to answer, but the part that we're interested in is a bit further on. Question, from presumably a reader. Question, got any bright ideas on how to make a fast million? Here's one. Just prove you've got ESP. What's the deal? Answer. Contact the James Randi Educational Foundation, JREF, at www.randi.org and arrange to do a demo for them, quote, of any paranormal, supernatural, or occult power or event, end quote, of any kind, under, quote, proper observing conditions, end quote. The guy's for real. A professional magician and well-known author and skeptic. He doubts you can fill the bill. But if you can, he's got $1 million US to make it worth your while. So far, many have tried, none has collected, noting that several claimants have, quote, suffered great personal embarrassment, end quote. Randi cautions, I strongly advise you to conduct proper double-blind tests of any ability you believe you can demonstrate before undergoing a testing for this prize. Oh, how I miss my old friend James Randi. But there you go. And of course, James Randi, originally from Canada. A tiny selection of some of the mentions of the paranormal and the supernatural and so on from Canadian newspapers over the decades. And that one dated, when was that dated? The one about the European skeptics, that was 1990. I will send that clipping off to my friends at the ESP podcast, the European Skeptics podcast, Andras and Pontus and Annika. So there you go. A delightful look around some of the newspapers from that part of the world. And I'm sure if I dig a bit deeper, I can find a lot more from the mysterious land of Canada. And you too can look up all sorts of strange history when you spend some time in any digital archive of newspapers from around the world. And you know what? You'll never know what you might find. Thank you for listening to The Skeptic Zone. Coming up on next week's show, part 2 of the Book of Tim with Out of Body. More body dysphoria and interesting things to do with the body. And the Trove segment next week will look at naturopaths. Naturopaths, who are, I imagine, are in your country as much as they're in Australia. It's not hard to find a naturopath. Sometimes, sadly enough, they are attached to pharmacies. You go into your local pharmacy, and sometimes you'll find in the corner a naturopath clinic, complete with naturopath, who do things, I kid you not, because I went along one day and had it done, iridology. Iridology in pharmacies. Mind you, as we know from long experience, pharmacies can end up selling all sorts of quackery like homeopathy and those copper bracelets for your wrists or anti-snoring rings and all sorts of things. Thank you to those people. As we mentioned earlier on in the show, where Maynard was prompting me to say this, thank you to the people who contribute to the show financially at skepticzone.tv. The show isn't exactly outrageously expensive to produce, but it's not free, it's not cheap, and it does incur certain costs, and there are always bills to pay. So if you contribute to the Skeptic Zone, of course, you have my everlasting thanks. And if you do enjoy the show, if it's part of your life, if you fall asleep listening to my voice, which some people do, even me sometimes, then I hope you might consider becoming a financial sponsor at skepticzone.tv. And it doesn't have to cost you much at all, maybe $5 a month. But until then, for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from the early morning, Sydney, Australia. You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone podcast. Please visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for show notes, contacts, and to access the back catalogue of episodes going back to 2008. You can follow the Skeptic Zone podcast on Twitter at Skeptic Zone, visit our Facebook page, or leave a review on iTunes. You can also support the Skeptic Zone via Patreon or PayPal. The Skeptic Zone podcast is an independent production. The views and opinions expressed on the Skeptic Zone are not necessarily those of Australian skeptics or any other skeptical organisation. Hello to those people who stay after the music for the Easter egg, the dice game. This is where I roll a dice, some dice, die, get them all mixed up. And you use your psychic, magic, intuition, skeptical godmother, fairy, angel from the internet powers to predict what number's going to come up. This week it's a D6, a six-sided die. I'm going to use an app, just because I've never done that before. It's just an iPhone app where you press a button and it rolls a die. Here we go. So have a guess, have a mystical insight. The first number coming up for this week is, it's very quiet, number 1. See if I can increase the volume. Maybe you'll hear the next one. Number 1 is the first number. What's the next number? Ready? Predict away, and here it comes. There we are. Bit of noise. Number 5. 1, 5, and the last number coming up. Predict away. 5. Susan Gobeck. You see, 5 does come up. Here we go. 5. It's ridiculous. No, Susan, it's not cheating. I'm not making it up. Today's winning numbers are 1, 5, and 5. And the supplementary, just in case you lucked out and you didn't get anything at all. Here it comes. One more roll. Crunch, crunch, crunch. 2. 1, 5, 5, 2. I'm sure there's a hidden meaning in there somewhere.